I'm on an affiliate board of the largest bank in the world, JP Morgan. I have my private equity life. I'm joining the National Humanities Institute board, right? I'm an Ashoka fellow, the social
Wow.
entrepreneurship. And then, it's all, I
By
have
the
a
way,
book.
James, I make big bean bags.
No, you build coalitions and meld traditions into manifesting feelings into a product.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn D. Nelson, that love sack guy. Thank you so much for all the support. This podcast is doing fantastically well, and it's all because of you. Please give it a like, give it a share, push it out to a friend, put it on social media. I have no advertisers on purpose, so I can just give you great content with some of the world's most successful people uninterrupted. So whether it's helping you in life or in business, that's what we're here for. Would really love your support, sharing it out in any way possible. Give it a 5-star review. Holy cow. On whatever platform you're listening on, that would mean a ton to me. Tradition. Right? Today's topic, tradition breeds coalition. Really think about that for a second. It is an incredibly powerful notion, something that I have found amazingly useful as the leader of an organization. Now it gets to employ thousands of people, and I think is known for a pretty unique culture at Lovesac. And it's all about establishing traditions and leaning into them. And by the way, they don't even have to be the most amazing traditions. There's just value in tradition, and it breeds, right? It engenders coalition. It brings people together. Okay. We have traditions with friends. We have traditions in business. And it's, what's the thing that comes from that? Togetherness, camaraderie, a sense of belonging, right? Part of something bigger than yourself. There's something incredibly anthropologically useful about traditions that resonates with really every human being on the planet. So today I have a guest who's embraced tradition, learned how to leverage it in his business and his work. This man has stepped into the role of resurrector for a company that was culturally important, but was on its way to becoming extinct, and had great success because of the way he led that company, including instilling and reverencing and embracing traditions that already existed, that he brought to the forefront and took them further. I'm talking about the one and only James Rhee. We break down this Shawnism, tradition breeds coalition, and we're going to talk about the value of looking at human beings beyond the numbers, how traditions, if they're nimble, connect the past, the present, and the future, the importance of identifying and cultivating natural traditions, the ones that may not come from people in leadership positions, but from the people on the front lines, especially, and how both in business and life and family, sometimes the person who can save it all is the person that you would least expect. I have found the value of establishing traditions in my work, in my family. Again, it's not even important what they are. It's important that you have them. And hopefully this discussion brings some of that to the forefront. Hopefully it's useful to you. I think you're going to love it. Mr. James Rhee, here we go. I am so stoked to introduce our guest today. This man has worn many hats as an investor, a CEO, a celebrated author, even a high school teacher at one point. Each role has enriched his unique perspective on life and leadership, with a unique background that bridges the worlds of education, entrepreneurship, executive leadership. This man has a deep understanding of how tradition breeds coalition, an enduring force that can unite diverse groups of people around a shared vision. With his blend of classroom wisdom and boardroom savvy, he's here to show us that no force in business or management is more powerful than strong tradition-rooted coalition. Please welcome to the podcast, the one and only James Rhee.
Whoop, whoop. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, James, without thinking too hard, without any prep, when you heard this little Shawnism, tradition breeds coalition, what was the first idea that came to your mind?
Like, Lordy, we could all use more of all of it. That was one. And number two was, all the words, I think breeds is what caught my eye. Like all three words, you need someone else to make it a real word. There is no tradition without someone else. You really can't breed without someone else, and there is no coalition without someone else. And so much of my work is based on sort of bringing to life mutualism, right?
Hmm.
Just relationships. And so, yeah, that's why I picked it.
No, that's good. And for people that maybe don't know your background, you promote as I do, I hope a little bit. Our ticker on Wall Street is LOVE, right? And I'm very proud of that. That was not an accident. You promote kindness and leadership, and you've done this through your book, Red Helicopter. You've done this in many different
Mhm.
realms. Uh, Maybe tell us just a little bit about your background and how that came to be.
Yeah, big picture. I'm a humanist, taught high school after college, went to law school to be a public defender, studied politics, philosophy, economics. So I'm a student about how people behave. It's not a
Mm.
traditional business background. I just love people. And I'm curious about why people make dumb decisions. And I'm curious about how you design systems that prime people to do good and bad things. That's number one. Number two, my entire career, what most people know me up until Ashley Stewart was I was a member of the general partnership of a very large private equity firm in Boston. I've invested billions of dollars of money, controlled deals, have had my hands in some of the most iconic brands in the country, like Meow Mix cat food and Murray's Discount. We owned Equinox Fitness Clubs. We owned 40% of Bass Pro. And so really have invested in places that bridge like sentimentality and emotion with quant. That's always what I've done. And then I think what sort of people know me for, which is funny, they don't really know my background before this. I did something kind of outrageous at Ashley Stewart as a first time CEO. And for those of you who can't see my face, I'm a Long Island guy with a Korean face. And I partnered with like millions of Black women in the country's largest like business servicing Black women because it kind of pissed me off that the business was failing and
Wow.
the whole world sort of bet against us. And we did something very special, which I think the world is only beginning to understand now as we delve a bit more into chaos. And so, yeah, I'm a humanist that knows how to make money. I don't think it's the other way around. I think it's more of like a musician poet that is not worried, not nervous about speaking in money.
That's cool. Well, first of all, congratulations on navigating life in, I think, such an interesting way. I don't think I've met a lot of people that have such a um, serpentine background, and I really respect it. And you know, my background's so weird because I'm still running the company I started when I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know, um, and that's very unique as well, for good and for bad. But as a human, um, I have many interests and strengths and abilities and talents that a lot of people wouldn't even know about. None of which I've always said like I'm kind of good at a lot of things, but I'm not great at anything. And so I can, I can identify a little bit with someone like you that doesn't just have a, kind of straightforward MBA, then was an investor, then became a CEO. Like it's really neat. I want to delve into that a little bit, but just to poke it at that a little bit as a humanist, as you say,
Mhm.
um, I have to know this right off the bat because I get asked a lot on this podcast. So I'm sitting in front of books. I read a gazillion books. They've been my mentor and teacher. You are too. Um, so right off the bat, because I read a lot in that realm, like
Yeah.
my favorite, I get asked all the time, what are my favorite books? I always go to books on psychology, Maxwell Maltz, psycho-cybernetics, back to the roots, some early stuff in human psychology. What are some of your most inspiring and foundational books that have made you who you are?
I mean, the first book, it has sentimental reasons for it. Is a book my dad gave me. It was the one of the first editions of Aesop's Fables,
Hmm.
and I read that over and over again. And it's like simple tales. We're talking about tradition today, right? So these longitudinally sturdy, transcendent stories with very few words, a couple of very pointed illustrations that force you as a reader to make your own conclusions, which is what I think a great teacher does, right? A great leader does too. And even when
Mhm.
you're talking to your customer in the commercial sense, great marketing allows the buyer to fill in the blanks, right? So it's sort of to say what's not said. And that's number one. One, because it taught me about simplicity and storytelling and truth. And two, it's because of my relationship with my dad.
Mhm.
It's has a lot of meaning for me. Uh, you know, for me, it's I read everything too. Like even the book I wrote, it's really not a business book; it's a piece of literature. So I read a lot of Melville, Austen, Dickens. These are things when people understood that literature, people were more polymaths. So people who wrote literature were actually also economists.
Mhm.
So back then they realized that like you couldn't deconstruct or reduce the human experience to a data table. And I've always sort of that's where I get my economics from, which I always remind my economics friends. I'm like, it's a social science. Like it's not, it's people are very.
They've tried to make it a hard science.
They really have, and it's not worked very well, right? There's a
Mhm.
whole
Yeah.
breed of new economists, and most people don't know that, right? Most people think if you said economics, they would say, "Oh, it's math." I'm like, no, it's really not. Like the
Yeah.
fundamental premise is not correct that people are utility driven. They're just not. Particularly during times like now, they're not. And so a lot of literature. And then, these days I'm rereading, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and just a lot of sci-fi inspiration too. Just thinking about, as an investor, I'm paid to be a futurist, right? So a lot of what's coming to pass in the 1920s to 1970s sci-fi has really been influencing how I view where we might be going. And then I read Ray Dalio, I read things like this, but I don't read a lot of straight business books per se. And so that's why I didn't write one. And that's what drove my publisher and Amazon a little bit nuts because I was like, I'm not going to play to your algorithms. Like,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah, that's cool. I respect that. I my book is very different. I really love the literary aspect of your book, and just the same, my little Let Me Save You 25 Years, you could read it in like 90 minutes. It's both, of course, the story of Lovesac told because it's kind of like a wild story. Like if you got into it, right? I won $1 million on TV, and we've been through a complete, chapter 11 reorg and the highs and the lows and everything else in between. But really, I wanted to get out just some of these thoughts I have on life that are both a little bit businessy, but also just humany, right? Thoughts, kind of like our topic today. Tradition breeds coalition, came from my observation, having been thrust into a leadership role at a pretty young age. And then, the responsibility mounted with the size of the company very quickly. Lovesac, even in its early rounds before our more recent success, became a multi-million dollar, multi tens of millions of dollars company. And in my early 20s, that's a lot to um, shoulder. And it was very exciting. But I had instincts for a lot of those things in leadership. I also had various opportunities growing up, in scouts
mhm.
and in school to practice leadership. And I very quickly established a lot of traditions that even to this day, 26 years in, pay off in, I think, spades. And ultimately with the ambition that we have, which is really to build a brand, something that you're very familiar with. And
Yeah.
you and I know what that means. We can get into that in a minute for people. But I'm a big believer in this idea of establishing and maintaining useful traditions, almost no matter what they are. It almost matters less what they are, and more that um, they're promoted and they can evolve with a culture. And so,
Yeah.
as we talk about that, whether you want to come at it from a business sense or even just from a human psychology sense, what do you reflect on as you think about traditions and the role they play in the cultures that we're in?
Yeah, if like particularly now, right? And it's not just because of divisiveness. Like forget that let's focus on more the tech and more artificial intelligence, more the need it seems for everyone to really promote, the big word is efficiency. And I'm hyper quantitative, like I'm a private equity person, right? Went to law school. It's not like I'm not undisciplined. And
Mhm.
so the musician part of me forces me to be less disciplined. So I always two Jameses fight all the time. It's pretty interesting in my head. But like traditions, if you think about going forward, like I like them because sometimes the origin story is murky, like a folk song.
Hmm.
People, they're from a psychology standpoint, they are physical actions, they're heuristics that people just sort of do. It's much more limbic system driven. Like it's almost reflexive, instinctive, and you're trusting your intuition, which when you were 18, you really did, which is why, you've had so much success is because you've kept that. It's very different being 18 and being a 50-year-old entrepreneur. It's different, I think. Anyway, so these actions and heuristics and limbic system, kind of irrational a little bit, story, lore, these are very difficult to put into a repeatable 0-1 algorithm. They generally involve an exchange of emotion. It reminds you of things, of times, of people that have come and gone. Oftentimes, I think for me, a lot of these traditions like Thanksgiving or, just they're bittersweet. It's sad sometimes because they remind you of tougher times that you overcame, but there's joy because in a very Buddhist way, like you overcame that, you're still here, but you're mourning too. And that complexity of emotion and that exchange of emotion, it's so distinctly human, and it's that's why I love these traditions. And it's I think it's going to be much more important going forward for companies, leaders, societies to really have these uncodable, non-algorithmic, social compact enhancing traditions that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I reflect on it. So just this last week at Lovesac, we had what we call our annual kickoff, which is again one of these traditions. If you were, you could look at it just like a business meeting that should be on the calendar for any company that's being administrated. But we do this dumb thing that I honestly like. I'm embarrassed to even say it out loud, but we somewhere along the way, I watched some TED talk. You've given a great TED talk. I watched some TED talk about power posing. You probably caught that one in your days as a leader.
yeah,
And it's since been, some will say it's been debunked, whatever. And this is the idea that, human beings from the dawn of mankind have thrust their hands up in the air when they feel successful, having vanquished their enemies or their woolly mammoth.
yep,
And so the anthropologist asked the question, hey, could it be reversed? When we feel successful, of course, we have shots of endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, our cortisol is lowered. Might we be able to induce that by putting our hands in the air, getting big, against our adversaries, and as the animal kingdom does, and create those same release of these chemicals that make us feel great. And in this study, of course, the answer is yes. And so anyway, we began power posing at Lovesac years ago, and now here we are, hybrid workforce. We're working from home, many of us at Lovesac now. And I, kick it off with music and everyone stands up. We put our hands in the air, whether or not it's been debunked, it doesn't matter anymore.
yes,
In fact, what's funny is the first time we ever really did this after I'd caught that talk, I can't remember the exact year, but it was time stamped because Bruno Mars was the song. Don't believe me, just watch. And of course, that song now. And so every time we have a big meeting, our manager fest in the fall, this AKO, we kick it off with this dumb power pose. And it looks like some kind of cult, all these people, hundreds of people standing with their hands in the air, their feet apart in a room, or in this case, at home, their kids might be, watching if they're in the living room or something, who knows. And here their goofy CEO of a public company is making a power pose or asking them to. And but you know what? Like there are times when I've wanted to skip it, or in other meetings have skipped and been called out on it. Like people are like, "What the heck? Where's the power pose?" And it's like, "Oh, can we just get over this dumb song? Can we just like get over the?" But it's amazing. Forget whether it actually works. I think it does actually. At least it makes. I always feel great after. I've done it before speeches myself. I've been hit in the face by the by the kitchen, by the in some conference room somewhere, about to go on stage in front of 1,000 people because the waiting staff, I'm over there power posing, hiding in the corner, getting jacked up for a speech, and the door hits me in the face as the waiters come through. My point is,
Yeah.
for the company Lovesac, it's become a tradition and it has value in unto itself.
Yeah.
And outsiders probably feel weird the first time they're thrust into this, but in the end, they're kind of initiated into the fold, and that's why I'm saying it almost doesn't matter what the tradition is, as long as it's not, an abjectly negative one. But there's just power in these repeatable, let alone the AKO itself as a tradition, as a meeting that we operate a certain way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the most human, totally. It's the most human, right? It's like it takes us back to like sitting around a campfire, right? This is not like it's verbal storytelling.
Yeah.
It's this is at the core of who we are genetically. I mean, it's verbal storytelling, and the first three chapters of my book is it's present, past, future, right? So traditions, if they're nimble, they connect those three spaces of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be careful of them not to be just like the lunch warmer in my book, which is like reactionary and outdated. You have to keep it fresh. And so these
Yeah.
stories, when new people, I think the biggest challenge sometimes with traditions, whether it's a company or a country, is that you want everyone to be able to sort of find there's a transcendent truth in the story or the tradition that they can attach to, have a story that is related, that's very personal then to them too, and it keeps the tradition fresh. Like it moves it forward. It doesn't exclude new employees, or
Yeah.
you can get in trouble with that too, with customers too, right? If there's a tradition, the new customers they don't understand the story, right? So they feel excluded. And so, yeah, I did that with like just in a very tangible way, like Ashley Stewart, when 4 years into it, we ended up throwing this huge like concert in Brooklyn, like En Vogue and like Lonnie Love, Whoopi Goldberg. It was like huge, but that was became a tradition. But what people also intuitively knew was that it was celebrating traditions that started 4 years prior when we were on our back and
Mm-hmm.
about to liquidate. That it was it was like our first little karaoke sessions amongst the team when we had no money and nothing, and to stay awake at night and to like it was like gallows humor. We would do stupid things. And every
Mm-hmm.
year we would sort of say, I remember that. We had like nothing and we had like $8 for food. Every year we had $16, $32. But that was the heritage of that tradition. And so people felt it in that theater, right? Like every year they're
Yeah.
like, what's going on here? This is celebrating something. And it celebrated, as I was saying before, it was bittersweet. It was really fun. We were just jamming out, but it was sad too. Like there's a lot of hardship that tradition gets you through too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so valuable, I think, for anyone listening to contemplate your role in any kinds of traditions, as either as a participant, that where it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, Shawn's gonna make me power pose again. I'm an introvert. I don't want to do that. Okay. On the other hand, what about your own, whether it's your organization, whatever that is to you, or your family,
Yeah.
whatever that is to you, the people around you that you love, your friend circle. I would challenge you to contemplate, have you established any traditions, and do you reverence them? Because as we're trying to make the case for here, James and I, there's tremendous power in them. And I love, James, that you brought it to the humanity of it. Like, I think that when things, uh, meetings, organizations, actions, songs,
Mhm.
um, conversations, brands resonate with humans at some core level, right? One of my favorite books, Legendary Brands. It's this weird book. It's out of print. I don't know if you ever stumbled across it, but it's one of the few books that unpacks those brand archetypes that I'm sure you've come across, and it does a good job explaining, as an example, why Harley Davidson resonated with middle-aged attorneys,
Yes.
because it was the outlaw brand and it spoke to their soul. It
Yeah.
spoke to the outlaw inside of them that never gets to be expressed as a, white collared, tie wearing, 5 day a week attorney. And then on the weekend, I can go and they're not even necessarily aware that they are attracted to Harley Davidson because of their soul's resonance with the outlaw.
Yeah.
They don't think of themselves that way, certainly, unless they've read something to this end. But when a thing is able to resonate with a human soul at one of these archetypal levels, it is powerful. And traditions of almost any sort, I think, are able to achieve that in some unique ways. And the part that I wanted, you're welcome to comment on that, but also just this idea of humanity. You've brought it up a few times in our discussion already.
Yeah.
I'm a big the reason like you, I love fiction as well, good fiction, and I love music, and I love these books about psychology more than I love the business books. I've read all the business books because I kind of have needed to, and I've gleaned from
Yeah.
them. But the stuff I love and I read on my own is, stuff about psychology, and I think something that's sometimes lost in corporate life and forgotten about is the fact that even the word company, what does that mean? Like the company you keep, like a company is nothing more than a group of humans.
Yeah. Or like the word talent. I mean, talent used to be, it was an economic measurement that was indivisible from humanity. It's all like the word inspire, right? Like I think great brands or leaders that inspire. I mean, it's understanding that people don't just say that. It's inspire means like it's in Latin to give breath. And so it's when people are drowning or they just can't breathe and like an inspirational brand leader, they're literally saying, I finally could breathe.
Hmm.
And so a week and a half ago, I was asked to address 700 business school deans in Las Vegas about the future of curriculum and like what we should be teaching business leaders. They got a big lesson in the Korean word chang, which is a lot of what's in the book. And some of these older civilizations that have been around for 5,000 years, like America's really young, right? So
Yeah.
another 4,700 years, they're going to be words and feelings that have evolved for 4,700 years. They'll take on a much more nuanced meaning. But some of the civilizations that are not American, that have been around for much longer, there's no direct equivalent translation for chang in English. Like the closest word is goodwill, which is why I talk about that. And like when people ask me what is chang, and I try to explain it, I have to use art, music, film to show them what it feels like. And so I always say to them, do you remember the end of It's a Wonderful Life? And when, he's at the end and all the people monetize his goodwill and that feeling you have in your chest,
Hmm.
that is chang. And that's why that movie, which was so not popular when it was released, is a tradition, right? That is a traditional holiday film that we all watch. And people want to ask, why do we cry? It's about a bank and a suicide. It's about mutualism. But really, if you're Korean, you would say that Jimmy Stewart and that scene created a lot of chang, which is connectedness, right? It's a real human connectedness, um, which is at the heart of what a tradition is, right? It's this visceral feeling that it's going to be very high in demand over the next 30, 40, 50 years, just given where we are going sociologically.
Yeah. And I think it's, one of the, again, tangential observations that stuck with me through my weird background, a bit like yours in the sense that even though professionally I've sort of focused on love cycles my whole life, there was a moment in my 20s where I took a break for a year to go become a management training consultant and to build on what you're talking about. And I was exposed to Jungian psychology, right? Carl Jung, and through the MBTI, right? The Myers-Briggs type indicator, which it's one of these tools that people use. And look, some people believe in that stuff, some people don't. Um, there's different tools. But I became a certified, you know, uh, administrator, facilitator for these MBTI, and I was
Mm.
doing this in China. So I speak Mandarin Chinese. I learned Mandarin from being a missionary. I lived over there for years of my life. It's a long story, but I got to do this work, and it's so interesting that, like, just if you look at the world as these 16 Jungian types, and there's 16 core types based on these four key uh, attributes of our personalities. And in my case, I'm an ENFP. And isn't it interesting that, like, more than 60% of entrepreneurs, founders of companies, happen to be this one type, ENFPs. And there are 16 different types that are kind of equally distributed amongst the population. But isn't it also interesting that more than 60% of CEOs, so, let's call it like the professional management class, are the polar opposite to
Yeah,
that?
ENTJ.
Exactly. And my point in referencing this is that the difference of administering a company like an MBA, right? Masters of Business Administration. And look, that's a little bit literal, but the act of administering a company or an organization versus the act of leading one can be very different. You were, and I'd love to know more about how you became the CEO,
Yeah.
right? Um, at Ashley Stewart, because obviously coming in as an investor, there's lots of paths to that. But you had tremendous success there, I believe, because you are a humanist and you understand people, and humanists can lead in ways that administrators don't always choose or don't always know intuitively.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah,
your
I'm
experience?
yeah, I'm like, look, I am it took me a long time to understand this word. So in my life, I am ENFP, ENFJ. It's really has fluctuated. I can be very, very J in certain aspects of my life.
What does that mean for people that aren't familiar?
Oh, like, like execution mode, get stuff done. Like, it's
Mhm.
really just I can do that.
On time,
I have to have done it. Plan,
on
I've got
task,
it
that's a
scheduled
J.
out.
Where P is much more flexible,
Yeah. Time
often
is
late.
amorphous.
Yeah,
Sometimes it drives people nuts because you're like, I can't commit to that quite.
right.
Let me think about it. But I think the word that for me, I didn't really truly like. I'm a big word guy, right? I just like definitions, derivation. What does it really mean? And it's the word creativity. It's being a creative. And so I used to, in my household, being a creative, like you have to picture a 1971 born, you know, Harvard undergrad, Korean immigrants. If I said to them, I was a creative, I wanted to be a creative, or I have a lot of professional musicians in my genealogy. So, like, a lot of my a lot of my roommates and actors or friends are famous actors and producers, and they're in the movie business.
Wow.
And I'm like, I never saw myself like that. But because I took the American, more English standard definition of being a creative as someone who's like an artist or someone who paints or is a musician, but it's not like I am a creative. Like I am an artist, and that's how I am wired. That's how I see the world. Like I may not be a professional musician, but like I'm high in musicality. And so that eureka, I was able to have that. and you may be like, duh, James, that's why you were a high school teacher, law school, private act. Look at your life. But it didn't strike me like that. I wasn't self-aware. But
Yeah.
I ended up being CEO of Ashley Stewart because, and that sort of helped me understand what being a creative was. Yeah, I was at a very particular point in my life. I was, I'm 54 in a couple of days. So I was 42, 43, and it's it's like you're old enough to understand more things. Dad's dying. Um, there's a lot of things I'm contemplating. I'm a father of three at that point. And there was this little company, which is not that little, but it bothered me that this company was failing, and I didn't like where private equity was going. So in my career, so I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs like you,
Hmm.
kind of protecting them from more of the standard elements of finance, right? Because I speak both languages, right? I'm like, no, like he founded the bit, like no, like
Yeah.
no, it's
Leave
that,
them
right?
alone. Right.
And then translating to you and saying this, I think this is what they're really saying. Like this, oh, okay. Anyway, and so like during that time, yeah, like it helped me being so. I had to be creative because let's face it, the business had lost money for 22 years. Nothing they had done was right. And you had to be creative because the core customer base, which was female and black and plus size and moderate income, it's not like all the rules of monopoly that are wired in the world are wired easily for them.
Hmm.
And I was part of the monopoly board, big building in Boston, Harvard College, Harvard Law School, that Rolodex, right? Like, and I'm like, I know why that they're not winning this game. It's sort of like my mom didn't win that game. I get it. And they wanted me to win that game. And then I got to a point at 42, I'm like, isn't it going to be more fun to use all the things I learned to help a ton of really awesome people to win a game in their own way and
Mm.
teach them certain these rules? So I had to create a brand new system. It was a whole new economic system, whole new business system, and org system, and it wasn't from my business background, like doing the numbers and doing the algorithms. I knew how to do that, but it came more from my background as a literature person, as a historian, right, as a musician. And it was like, and I had to get them in the world to see it.
Hmm.
That was the most challenging part of the whole thing. I saw it, but it's like hard sometimes to get other people to see something that hasn't quite happened yet before. And I think for every entrepreneur, that's the biggest conundrum. You have it in your head. How do you get everyone else to see what's in your head? You know,
So here you are, a Boston, Northeast, whatever, private equity guy taking on the leadership of a brand targeting built by a
black,
brand for plus size women,
black.
black women.
Yeah.
What traditions did you defend and celebrate that culture had developed or establish as a leader there that had a positive effect?
It was in the stores, right? I mean, that's where it was. So I quickly sort of surmised, I'm like, okay, the corporate office has destroyed what's in the field every day. So I was like, disregard. So I was out hanging jewelry, like in like Mattapan, Southside Chicago. Like you have to picture. I hope when you post this, people can see my face. It's just like
Right.
I'm out there working. I'm just like whatever, and and it was really the first tradition. The first act. The reason why the word kindness came out of my mouth was I didn't have a better word for it, but a lot of it was also like how they received me. The entire world laughed at me, right? They have to understand, like my entire like Wall Street Rolodex are like, you're freaking nuts. Like, what are you
Mm.
stupid? Like it was that visceral, right?
Wow.
It was making people uncomfortable. And I'm
Of
like,
all the
listen,
places you could go and do, you've chosen to
yeah,
hitch yourself to that wagon.
yeah. I was like, what? But I would say to them, but you didn't teach high school and go to law school as a public defense. Like, I don't know. Like we're different, I guess, And so, and I'm sorry I make you uncomfortable. Like, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. Like, this is something I want to do. And anyway, so like the way that I was received in the stores, um, boy, was it nice for me to receive
Mm.
that. They saw right through everything. And talk about,
Meaning what? When you say they saw right through everything, what do you mean by
they had
that?
every right to look at me and say, "What are you talking about?" Right? Like you're a dude, you got this Asian face, you have this like Ivy League pedigree, you're private. What the heck are you?
Mm.
They didn't. And it was this feeling, it's this chung, it's this they knew. They're like, you may be the right guy. Like you care. We
Mm.
know you're sincere, right? We trust you. We can feel it. Like you're not like everyone else that's walked in here with false promises. Like
Yeah.
that you
They could somehow in the way that you communicated or maybe just carried yourself, these humans could sense that this human, you,
yes.
had good intentions and maybe even the facility to help them achieve what they were trying to achieve. Right? They were able to sense that viscerally. Sounds like.
More than I could myself, right?
Mm.
They were encouraging me and saying, "We think you're the right guy." And I
Wow.
was like, "Okay." You know, I'm the only one who showed up, by the way. So, okay. And but those traditions, like I saw this happening between customers and employees and customers and customers. Like these, it's anyway, so these are the things I saw, right? And so what we did is that I mimicked those behaviors and actions and traditions in the stores because they had their own little traditions in all the stores, right? At Thanksgiving they did this, and Mother's Day there was this white party, and I just said, "Oh," and it was like a sociologist. I just collected all of them and then said,
Mm.
if I were to put this in a scaled musical, like slash business plan, and put org theory behind it, and realize I also couldn't be a not for profit, like I had to make money. How would I do it? And so it was basically that quilting of all these traditions from all over the country. And then at corporate office too, like I
Yeah.
dispensed with basically everything. It was a full startup, right? So, but the thing that I loved the most about the corporate traditions was that every year they had potlucks. People made food and they bring it in, and it was such a United Colors at Benetton home office, like 50 countries, 40 languages. It was sort of that. I was like, this is awesome. And I was like, I bet the food's really good. And so that potluck, which was like an afterthought, that it became like a central component of our go forward, very successful business. It was,
Wow.
and everyone like these fancy pants people on Wall Street were like begging for invites to the potluck because it was the best food in the metro New York area. And
Wow.
so these things, like, if you think about the humanity of, again, it's centered around food.
Yeah.
You know?
So I want to double click on that for 1 minute. I think that it strikes me that you parachute in there as this oncoming CEO. I assume that you were exposed to this business through the investment side.
Yeah, I was on the board. It was a failed portfolio company of many investments, and I left. Yeah, it was not even. It was like even more than being CEO. It's like more. I was also a big owner because no one gave me money. I had to call in favors to take the business out of bankruptcy. Like no one backed the company, and so
Yeah.
I had a life and death decision about what do I
You took
promise.
on this, you took on this
It's life.
albatross of a
Yeah.
business, took the risk, rounded up the cash. By the way, I understand everything you're describing because I had to live through the other side of that, right? As a founder of a business, I had to go through a Chapter 11 reorg very early because of my stupid mistakes as a young leader and needing people like you to support me in reemerging. And thankfully, we did. And so you and I are like
It's like
we lived on opposite
bizarro
sides
world, right? Like I
of
get
the
it.
table.
I understand. Yeah.
But what's cool about what you're saying, and this is what I love, is because I had my versions of you, as it were, that helped me come through the tunnel. And what you did that I think is so noteworthy as a leader. Look, you have me as a founder that is one archetype. I can go and I can, establish a lot of the traditions of this company or, allow them to bubble up as our story unfolds. you join a company midstream and you recognize and reverence traditions that were already there, that probably some of the people experiencing them didn't
Couldn't see.
necessarily even see as traditions. They were just things they did.
Yeah.
And that's my point to people listening is like, I love that, they can come from the top down. There's nothing wrong with that. They can come from the bottom up, but you have to be wise enough wherever traditions emerge to cultivate them, kind of like, like you cultivate like a young chick in an incubator, or like a young plant, a seedling. You have to sort of like see, and they can be dumb. They don't have to be remarkable, a potluck. They don't have to be,
Yeah.
oh, I've been thinking hard about something we should do this year that would really stick. It's like, go where the puck is, see the seedlings that are growing and just cultivate them. And now, like at Lovesac, we have this amazing tradition around what we call Manager Fest, which is like the dumbest. It's intentionally a dumb name because, like, it's kind of like a wink at being like super corporate, like manager, and
Yeah.
fest, like rock festival. And they've wanted to change the name to something more sexy or whatever. I said, no, I want to call it Manager Fest because it's a dumb name. And it's emerging into its own, like you describe, event that now people are kind of looking for invites for, because we do invite people from the outside to attend. We have these cool musical guests, and we have this amazing party and great food, whatever. And but there are traditions inside that tradition, and we reverence it. And it'd be easy, by the way, for an investor to come in, as private equity to be like, man,
Yep.
that's another $1 million spend
Yep.
against your P&L that you could let drop to the bottom line. But by the way, I think we have people that stay at this company because we have people that have been here for over a decade, lots of them. On the front lines, as you described, which is a big part of our tradition. Like I spent the last 26 Black Fridays working in malls.
Yep.
I don't have to. No one expects that of me as a public company CEO, but I honor that tradition. And we just got off a call today where everyone, we call it frontline, they get out on the front and they just go work. They just go work in showrooms. Anyway, these traditions are the glue, I think, that keep people here. I think some people stay in their job in a mall. They've been there for years and years and years just to make it to another Manager Fest. And I
100%.
don't say that to make fun of them even remotely. I love them for it. My point is, of all the things, including their salary and their pay and everything else that you need to motivate people to move your cause forward, tradition is one of them. And if you're an intuitive leader, like you clearly are, you find ways to build and protect those, and in fact, even water them and nurture them, as you described.
And that's why, like, the curriculum of the future, this is why I'm spending a chunk of my time these days seeing if I could teach what I do, the process, all the disciplines. Because if I can teach it,
Hmm.
then it's really scalable, right? Then it
Yeah.
becomes like secular faith, ideology, like there's a real curriculum. So yeah, that's why I'm teaching it at MIT, teaching it at Howard, teaching it at Duke in a classroom setting, because that forced me to really put this into like discipline terms and learning experience. And what
Interesting.
all the curricula is based on, it's a system dynamics chassis. So it's not linear thinking. It's more of a creative thinking, but it's all grounded in philosophy, ethics, sociology, anthropology, humanities. And while they're learning like, private equity, law, like
Hmm.
all the quant, like option derivative theory, like it's all being taught, but it's more taught in the language of humanists. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the world, right? It's like
What's the name
taking,
of this course?
at Howard, it's called Systems of Life, Money, Joy. At Duke, it's called The Way the World Works, parentheses, life, money, joy. And MIT, the exec ed class I taught for a while, it was like just purpose. And so it comes, you are not going to be surprised from this. I know, just first of all, by the way, I really feel like I should have an invite to that event. Um,
Oh, you've got it.
yeah, that's number
Yeah,
one. Let's set
that's
the
easy.
highest priorities. Number two is, it probably doesn't surprise you that early on, like during Ashley Stewart, and then particularly when because the book is not about anything, but it's about everything. Like the people who got it the fastest were physicists, creatives, like faith leaders of all faiths, right? It's from many different disciplines. And they're like, oh, it's kind of like, it's an operating system. And I said, yes. And it's like, why, one of the things I explore a lot in life is like, it's like, why, how difficult it is for young people to have 40 identities, social media, this. I'm like, I have problems with just one.
Wow.
So like, I'm like, like people don't pause and think. I'm like, do you really think sociology goes away and biology goes away once you cross into this fictional space called work? Like, you're still human. And we just like, and I think that sort of org theory and leadership, particularly against the backdrop of AI, we're going to see a lot more youthful leaders have a lot more success because they still have that brain.
Yeah. In fact, I heard a really cool take on this the other day from a super respected, um, you know, multi-hundred millionaire source, successful group of people, you know, who came up through the coding world. And obviously there's been billions and trillions created by successful coders, successful, um, computer scientists in this day and age, of course. And they were riffing on the idea that perhaps even their own children who they are, teaching coding at a formative age, because that's obviously where they've found their success. They speculate that maybe it's not even necessary anymore because AI can and will be so adept at that,
Yes.
that perhaps the new source of real uh, leadership and success in this new realm that's being created will be um, the more creative types, those well versed in philosophy and systems thinking and the ability to just connect the dots because the computer can do it for you. If you can imagine it and you
Yes.
can imagine the utility necessary to create value in any realm and you can articulate it. So the ability to communicate well, the ability to write well, right?
Yes.
It's a fundamental, and by the way, a lot of these things are being disintegrated by, I think, this is my opinion now, the current state of things like social media and whatnot, where people don't have necessarily the even the stamina to write long form, think long form. Their attention spans being dwindled down to
7
nothing.
seconds.
But
7.
those who
Yeah.
somehow have those natural abilities or pursue them, like I'm really, it gives me more hope for my son, who my son is, in my humble opinion, I've never talked about this on my podcast, but my son is very intelligent. He's 14 years old, but when he was young, I kind of thought he would, with that intelligence that was obvious, he like learned how to read on his own when he was like 3 years old. It was really weird. We never taught him. He just like somehow figured it out. He like deciphered how to read on his own. So I thought, steering him toward physics and toward, coding, that sort of thing. But as I watch him, and he said to me the other day, he's read like all of the Sherlock Holmes, which is very hard. He walks around with a dictionary, this kid. I mean, literally like a Webster's dictionary, so he can read Sherlock Holmes because it was written so long ago. There are so many words of Old English meaning that aren't even available in an online dictionary most of the time. So what's my point? He has these strengths in literature and he wants to be a writer. I think he's expressed this, which is surprising to me. But all of a sudden I have hope that perhaps kids like him
Yeah.
and people like you, James, like you have had unique success for a person with your interests and background as a musician, as a creative, as a writer. Like you found a way to connect that into, listen, I learned this the hard way as a young entrepreneur on the other side of the table. All the money's in money. Like the finance world, private equity, like I didn't even know what finance was, literally. Even after graduating college, to me, it was synonymous with accounting. I know that sounds really dumb,
No, it doesn't sound dumb. That I get it. I mean, I understand. Like
but
that's
somehow you span this world and you've created so much value for yourself and others by marrying these these two sides of the brain, as some say, or these, these very different realms, and you're living.
But you have look what you said in the beginning of the podcast. You have like when you have two. I think you're not. You said you're good at a lot of things, and the future of I think intelligence, leadership, entrepreneurship, just generally creativity. Just think about creating like real creativity. You are creative. You created a business, right? So and a whole way of living. It's not just we haven't gotten to brand yet, but like that's the we are going the opposite way of where we should. Whereas people have been pushing people to be vertical, like really deep here. Anything that's linear function is going to be done better by a computer. So like people
Yes.
who are good at a lot of things, lateral, the key is like your brain. Like it doesn't matter how many neurons you have, it's the synapses. It's how they're the connectedness is the most important thing. And then even like the other thing that's opposite, like Ashley Stewart, we changed the vector and everything, right? I turned all the economics of the business inside out. Like we were importing through ecom like large amounts of money from like wider neighborhoods on purpose. Usually the money goes the other direction. I did everything backwards. And so if you think about it that way, like what's backwards? I think what we're doing right now is group think. Like everyone was going into coding for a while. It is all going to be automated.
Yeah.
And people are not reading and writing anymore. I'm like, no, that's going to be really important. And so
Yes.
I think a lot of the leading technologists, like I, go to lunch at dinner with some of my guys who are just starting to think, they know they're pushing their kids in that way. Philosophy, long form thinking, off the devices.
Well, what's funny is we started off this conversation with this acknowledgement there, this kind of just fun comment about economics and how that school in look, all sciences, right, want to be like physics, where it's so perfect and so rule bound. But things that are perfect and rule bound will be the domain of AI for
Yes,
sure. And that's what's funny is so you have all these physics experts, these computer scientists that are those that are the most intelligent and able to connect the dots are seeing what you just said, where because now we will theoretically, but likely be able to rely on computers to leverage those rules and ways of programming to achieve all kinds of things that we can't even imagine today. But what then is left is the opportunity for the creatives. And so what's funny is the economics people don't need to uh, be jealous of physics anymore. In fact, it will be the ability to leverage the humanist side, which is where you come from. I think like ultimately that is your message, right? And I don't know you that well, but from everything that I've read and observed and everything you've said on this podcast, right? You are squarely planted there.
mhm,
And I really admire what you're doing because I think that you are on the curve and ahead of the curve for where the puck is going. And isn't it beautiful that it comes back to a human place? Isn't it ironic that AI, which is in a lot of ways, the most cold, heartless, and um, imaginable embodiment of where computers and technology take us, leads us back to a place that might be more human and more possibility based on human capacity than those that could wield physics over this last century.
100%. And the way you said it, that is what, like, for me, like, the awakening that happened was like I'm sitting in that cafeteria. My life is in tatters. My friends are making fun of me. I'm away from my
Yeah,
family.
that's because you
I'm
left the money train
yeah,
for
I'm doing something with my heart. Like I'm interim
yeah,
CEO of this, company that's on the surface nothing to do with me. It forced me when you have nothing, which scarily, like Dalio does a better job saying this, so he has more legitimacy saying this. But every 70 to 90 years, you things reset.
hmm,
So I had nothing, and so that's why the word kindness came out of my mouth. Because when you have nothing, which AI is going to take away a lot and add things, but it's going to take away a lot of functionality from some people that they won't have a job. It's the reality. So it forces you, like what you were saying, what's left? What do you have left? And so in that instant, I know that's why it came out of my very intuitive human, like some bowels. It's not like I talk about kindness all the time. It was the first time I'd said it. I'm like, can we be kind and mathematically honest? Because I was like, if we don't have those two things in this chaos, we don't have anything. And so let's just start from there again. And that's my big hope, is that what you were saying is exactly how I feel, that AI is going to advance. It's inexorable. And I do have skepticism about how ethically it's going to be implemented. I just do. I know
Sure.
too many of the guys in it, and I wish I could say better. It's just not. So
Mhm.
what will be left? It may pull out of us the best of humanity.
Mm.
I think it has to. And so that's what I'm asking people. Like, when you have nothing and you're just in chaos, getting back to traditions, it's coming from that same visceral, non-algorithmic place. It's the most human place.
Yeah.
I think it's going to bring out the best in people. Um, I don't think we have a choice. So,
Well, and that's really why this little, again, this epithet is structured the way it is, right? Tradition breeds coalition. Obviously, it rhymes and that's useful on its own, but the idea that it pulls people together, and I don't believe, th- I mean, maybe I'm wrong, by the way. I don't really understand AI that well. I don't believe, though, that as much as AI will soak up, and it should, it'll be creative destruction. Just like, look, everyone thought no one would have anything to do when the steam engine took over work on the farm, and then of course the gas powered engine took over, and who's going to run the horses, who's going to, obviously people found plenty of things to do since then.
yes.
So this will be another round of creative destruction, but the coalition side, I
Yeah.
think, will be very difficult for AI to wrangle in the way that human beings that are intuitive and heart led, the way that you described your work at Ashley Stewart. And I look at, my role as I reflect now. I'm the CEO of a public company. I push myself to go work on the front lines and as I experience my interactions with people there, and just by showing up, forget whether I'm good at selling couches anymore,
Yeah.
which I think I can hang. They're better than I am, though. They do it all day long,
Yeah.
just by showing up, though, I've achieved something. And I know that sounds kind of dumb, but like that can't be the human side of things will never be replaced. And I think where we're going, it's going to be more important and more valuable than ever. And so the coalition side of things, what have you experienced and what have you observed as a practitioner in this realm, as
Yeah.
someone who's now teaching, many aspects of this? How do you reflect on the coalition part of as an
Yeah.
outcome of tradition?
Well, that's what Red Helicopter is, because that's what I'm building. Makes it sound too much like it's a company.
Mm,
But Red Helicopter, like the story itself, which we can get into later, it's a heuristic, it's a symbol. And then once people hear the story, it's like, oh. And then my life, if you think about, when you guys were preparing my bio, which was really well done, lovely done, if it is a walking coalition, right? So it's education, and even those three schools, you don't usually put MIT, Howard, and Duke in one mouthful together. That's very intentional, right? I'm on an affiliate board of the largest bank in the world, JP Morgan. I have my private equity life. I'm joining the National Humanities Institute board, right? I'm an Ashoka fellow, the social
wow.
entrepreneurship. And then, it's all,
By
I've
the way, James, I make big bean bags.
yeah. No, you build coalitions and meld traditions into manifesting feelings into a product that people come
I
back
look,
to.
I can't believe, though. I don't know how you do that. That's amazing. What an amazing career and what amazing span.
But you're doing,
Congratulations.
but after this, send me your email. I'm going to show you a bubble chart that I'll delete and you fill it in for yourself. You have this. I don't think you're naming it, like, to do what you're doing. You have it. and maybe you're not naming it like this, but but if you think about all those coalitions, and then mine in particular right now, like it transcends and it's uniting orthogonal interest, musicians and private equity people, but also race. Like I'm married to a white girl from North Carolina. I have biracial kids. I look like this. I chair entrepreneurship at Howard. A lot of the
Cool.
Ashley women were Hispanic, and so I think what's happening right now. I'm sort of looking at the country and the world a little, particularly our country. I'm like, come on,
Mm.
like, did you have a red helicopter moment when you were young too? Like, can you get behind just generosity and intuitive wisdom? Like, can you get behind that? And
Yeah.
that's what that coalition is building. And so I think when you start sort of asking, my tradition was remembering that red helicopter, right? Because it was a sad story too. It reminded me of some pretty hard times in my family. It was not
Mm.
an easy time. And so I'm asking people, that's why there's no red helicopter on the cover of the book, because I'm asking people, what's yours?
Interesting.
Right? Mine's literally a red helicopter, but you have another story from way back when you had courage, right? And it was like really clear thinking before the world tried to stick its hooks into you and say that you got to walk a straight line and like do what we say. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, and for what it's worth for me, I share it as in the opening of my book, Let Me Save You 25 Years. I'm sitting on the back. I'm 13 years old, 12 years old, 13, and I'm sitting on the back in the back seat of the bus on my way to this. It was the academic team. How cool was it to be on the academic team?
Did you have the jacket with the Letterman jacket?
No, we didn't have jackets, man. This is Granite School District, Salt Lake City, Utah. But I was too cool for everyone. I sit on the back seat, listen to my Sony Walkman, but this song came on, speaking. So I'm a musician. I play the piano and sing, and my kids all do. And that's a big part of our tradition here in the Nelson family. In fact, we open, when you come to Manager Fest, my little family band, the Nelson Six, we got to open for Flo Rida last year, selfishly.
Wow.
It's pretty fun. But music is a big part. Anyway, Billy Joel comes on, the song Everybody Has a Dream. Oh,
Yep.
here we go. Breaking out the guitar. I love
Have it.
this.
Yeah, I'm listening. Yep.
And it really rocked my world. I share it in the book, and it really, as I looked around to all these quote unquote nerds on the bus with me, of course, realizing in that moment, I'm also a nerd on the bus, and shouldn't be too cool for them. And they have dreams. This song repeats over and over again. This Billy Joel song. I don't know if you're familiar with
Oh
it.
yeah.
Everybody has a dream. And I'm looking at the biggest nerds in my junior high, realizing that, like, holy cow, they are every bit as important as I am. Each one of them as individuals is a child of God. They matter to their parents. They matter on this earth. And I am disgusted at myself for feeling like I am somehow better than they are at that, moment leading to that. And that was, here I am at, 13 years old, and I had a turning point. I would call it a red helicopter moment,
Yep.
where I began to appreciate humans. And that has influenced my leadership tremendously to this day. And it's the reason the book opens up with that. The Shawnism there is love matters. It's the reason that I'm so proud that Lovesac surreptitiously gets to sneak the word love onto your chest as you rock a Lovesac hoodie, because the name's kind of goofy, maybe even innuendo. Put it on your chest to begin with, but ultimately I'm putting love into the world. I get to hang it on the most trafficked mall stores in the United States. I get to put it on NASDAQ as our ticker, LOVE. And it all comes back to that moment, right? Where I started to understand that love matters.
It might be the only thing that matters.
Oh, yes.
You know?
That's it. And in fact, I wear this ring. Everything else is dust. I've talked about it on the pod before, because in the end, like, listen, you and I run around, we CEO companies, we try and make people money. We try and,
Yeah.
create vast loads of EBITDA. But in the end, it's all dust compared to the people who we either cultivate and get to build with, build coalition with, as we've talked about, or turn into hamburger on the way.
Yeah.
Because either way, you can make money. You can make money either way.
Yeah, and that's the turning point of for me, when people say later on, like, when did you know, like, when Ashley Stewart's gonna be successful, or what is success? What I say to people, it's chapter 7 of the book. It's the bridge where, in the bridge in a musical piece,
Yeah.
you can riff and do whatever you want. So I wrote the bridge. It was when my dad died. That chapter where 2 years in, dad's dead, daughter's almost dead. She survived and she's fine, but like same
Wow.
week. And I didn't tell anyone. I told my assistant, I just said, listen, Gina, like, I got to take my first week off in 2 years because it was not easy. And so I didn't ask for help. And so at my dad's funeral, my daughter was so not well that she couldn't come to my dad's funeral. My wife was at Mass Gen with her with children's. So I'm sitting there alone at my dad's funeral home, this random funeral home in New Jersey. And I thought it would just be his friends that came, which were a bunch of primary care physician Korean doctors. Okay. That's sort of his scene. But the whole company came. They defied my orders. They all showed up. But what really, when I lost it, was when a lot of the frontline workers from the retail stores carpool to come to my dad's funeral, and they all came in. So black women, and you could see when they were walking in, they were unsure of themselves, like if they were invited. But they made it a point, and they came up to my mom and said, "Hey, Mrs. Rhee, you know, you did a good job with your son."
Wow.
And my mom looked at me because she was flipping out. She was like, "Why is my private equity Harvard boy?" And I kept telling her, I was like, "Mom, it's you." Like, I didn't want to look the other way this time. Like, like, I was able to do some things where these very deserving women, they're thriving, and it's for you. And so she looked at me and she's like, "This is me." And then they came up to me and then said, James, why didn't they yelled at me? They're like, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" They're like, "You think you're such a tough guy that you can't ask for help? You can't ask for help?" I cried. I literally just sobbed in front of everyone, Wall Street, everyone's there. And so,
So James, I have to show you this.
that was it.
This
That's
is the
success, right? I mean, that moment when people ask me, I still live in that mental, emotional state now. I know what success is. It's that moment. And I don't let little things bother me anymore. I'm like, it just doesn't matter. Like,
that was a prototype copy. I have to show you this. So there you go. To mom, I owe you my life. It's the only dedication in the book, right? Isn't
yeah.
that the truth?
Well, the ending of the book, not to spoil it's like people, I get cursed out by a lot of random people these days because they're like, I'm expected to read a business book and I'm sobbing on an airplane, and my mom. It's a tribute to my parents, but particularly, obviously, my mom. My mom, like, the ultimate source of strength for me is that she loved me unequivocally, and I know what that feels like, and I'm lucky, and so I
That's
draw upon
amazing.
that. I draw upon that all the time. So there is nothing else that matters, and so I'm trying to do that for my children and as best I can to anyone, you know, that I meet, like, I'm like, they each have a unique life, and who am I to impede in their life? But they have to fly their own helicopter. I always tell people that. I was like, if you have to fly, I can help you, but you're flying. Like, and so,
Well, the fact that these women showed up for you says it all, and your ability to um, respect and embody and cultivate tradition amongst other leadership, you know, capabilities, but cultivate tradition in a way that bred coalition in your leadership of a company that wasn't even yours.
it was there. I gave it back to them.
Shows that it can come from many places, and it is a real skill to be cultivated and something to ponder, and not something that's talked about a lot. in a lot of leadership realms. But you pulled out the guitar, so what are you going to do?
Oh, I strum it when I think and create, but like in a lot of ways, what the anthem, the book is written, you're a music guy. I mean, the book is written in E flat major. Like the whole tone, it just is written. People are like, what? I'm like, it just is. And then I put up the original music, and when people listen to it, they're like, oh, that is the book. It is. And, it's a
Uh,
three flat major key. And
yeah.
a lot of times musicians use E flat major to change people's minds. So like Bohemian Rhapsodies in E flat major, Tony and Marie in West Side Story, when they sing Somewhere, it's an E flat major. It's sort of this new space time, right? And
Mm.
so to get people to suspend disbelief, and we are living in that time now, right? Like I think, and also to be an entrepreneur, you have to live in that bending space time mode. It's sort of like there's a new reality that you can create. So but for me, like the main, as a Long Island guy, because you brought it, I'm a Billy Joel guy. I grew up with Billy Joel. I'm a Long Island
Yeah.
guy. And so, but the other guy I grew up with was Springsteen.
Hmm.
And I used to think Springsteen, was this like, he hated Born in the USA, that he's, he's a tormented artist, right? He's just
Yeah.
sort of man against the machine, rage against the machine. And it took me a long time to really understand Bruce. It, I had to get older and more mature to understand what he was really singing. And so like, I often like Born to Run, like it's like the greatest American anthem, but it's I derive a lot of inspiration for it because it's bittersweet, right? He's literally pleading to this girl to jump in the car. He's like, I gotta get out of here. Like I gotta know how it feels. I want to know if love is wild, girl. I want to know if love is real. And it's the book is an anthem. Red Helicopter, what I'm doing as a movement, it's an anthem.
I
And I'm
love it.
singing literally Born to Run to people. I'm like, do you want to jump in the car? And except that song is composed in E major, so it's deceptively an anthem, and it sounds so like positive and happy. But I change it. It's like instead of he plays it that way. I like to play it the other way.
Hmm.
And so that's that bittersweetness that I think that it gets people to just sort of embrace like good, bad, sad, joy, entrepreneurship. Anyone who enters into it, this, you have to, if anyone who thinks it's toxically optimistic and happy to be an entrepreneur, you're crazy.
Hmm.
There's so much suffering, and you have to find strength in it, right? It's joy. And that's the value of tradition, right? And coalition is when people, it's all the people, unexpected people in particular, like the women who came to my dad's funeral, who show up for you,
That's amazing.
when you need it.
And I just want to wrap on this idea of you as, I've gotten to know you through this podcast. I think you're an inspiration for people who uh, aren't coders, who aren't brilliant physicists, who aren't necessarily, you know, an expert at something. People like me that I'm like barely good at a lot of things. I always wish that I had that one thing that I was good at. But I look at what I'm allowed to do in the seat I now occupy and the blessing of having a background like mine where, look, I'm not a great musician. I'm not a great dirt bike rider. I'm not a great businessman, but the confluence of many things allows me to be a leader in my own right,
Yep.
celebrate, venerate, and protect traditions that will breed. And that was intentional, as you pointed out, breed coalition amongst many people and ultimately achieve something useful. Lovesac will go on to do very big things. Will be a brand that will be here for 100 years. And I know that sounds dumb from a beanbag company, but you'll see. Like that's the Bruno Mars. Don't believe me? Just watch.
Yeah, I love it.
And there's a lot today even that don't believe in Lovesac as an under celebrated public company, small, micro cap public company. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah, low adversity is always good. I still have that underdog. I love when people say no, or You're great. I love it. It gives it's just a little bit more of a motivation. It used to drive me nuts. Like I'd be like, okay, but now as I've gotten, I just smile. I'm like,
That's right.
I'm like, it's okay. Like,
It's
and
okay. People don't know who you really are, what you're really even doing,
yes.
unless they really pay attention. So look, let's continue to try and pay attention to this guy. If follow him on Instagram as I do. I am James Rhee, RHEE, where you can continue to peel back the onion that is this man. Head to redhelicopter.com to learn more about James and grab a copy of his amazing book, Red Helicopter. So much more than a business book. Thank you so much to the intellectual investor, the High King, or His Highness of Harvard Law, the recipient of the Red Helicopter. And remember, if you're ever feeling a lack of direction or disconnected from others in business or in life, just remember that tradition breeds coalition. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.